Hello, everybody. My name is Tokoni Edmund Tamnabo. I'm a fourth year business student at Trent University, and I'm also a youth facilitator for the Young Men Leading Change program out of the Kawartha Sexual Assault Center in Peterborough, Ontario. And you're probably wondering what is Young Men Leading Change? What is that all about? Essentially, Young Men Leading Change it's a program that essentially is catered towards racialized young men in post-secondary and also secondary school, in order to educate them and get them involved and bring them into the conversation about ending gender-based violence. And we did this for racialized. We targeted specifically racialized men and minorities, just because, right? It's all about creating a space where people like me, people like myself, and minorities can have that space to be able to have conversations about consent, about what gender-based violence is, about masculinity. Whereas just because a lot of spaces are not, they're not a lot of spaces that enable people like myself to be able to have that conversation and genuinely have a better understanding of ourselves and have a better understanding of how we can possibly help in ending gender-based violence. The Kawartha Sexual Assault Center, we've been running this program since like 2018, 2017. It's been a wonderful program. It's been completely amazing and life-changing for me. And today we're gonna have a sort of a showcase and a sort of like a conversation, right? Where we have a few of our young leaders come on here, and we'll just talk a little bit about the things that we've been discussing over the past 12 weeks in this program. And we're gonna share some of what we've learned and some of the ideas we bounced off each other. Let's talk about it. Can I lead change as a man without being strong all the time? You know, let's have a wonderful conversation. Let's talk. Let's conversate.
Strong to me could be very different from what strong is to you or anyone else in the world, right? So if we first define everything, then I think it'll be a lot easier to, make our point.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any ideas what strong mean? What does strong mean to you?
Awesome. To be honest, right, when I got that question, I think my mind was just going straight to the strongest man activity that we did.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And just to give people a quick summary of what the strongest man activity is essentially we looked at an activity called the man box, which is one of the activities that we treat at Young Men Leading Change. And the man box essentially talked about, like, inside of the box, there's things that, what society essentially says a man should be. And then outside of the box is the things that, like, if a man is not what's inside of the box, then, he's that, and he's less of a man. Right? And I don't know if you remember that, Chris. You remember that?
Of course.
And then we moved down to the strongest man. Awesome. So we moved on to the strongest man. So it's essentially, who are those people, those men or women in our lives, and the people in general, the people in our lives that, have attributes and characteristics that we admire, and attributes and characteristics that we want to emulate, right? And who are those strong people in our lives? Who are those people that we actually look up to? Right? And essentially we find that we found out during the activity that a lot of the characteristics of that strongest man do not really relate to the characteristics that society that society says we should be, which is all those characteristics inside of the man box. Mm-hmm. Right? And that's the first thing that came to my mind when I thought about strong. What does strong mean? And for me, I feel like strong is, for me, I'm just going to say from the person I admire. And strong for me is my dad, right? He's strong, he's caring, he's supportive, he's dedicated, right? He's a listener, he's a strong listener. He listens to me when I'm trying to explain a dilemma that I'm in. He listens, finds solutions to problems, and most of all, he's a hard worker. He works really, really hard to ensure that I and my siblings are well taken care of. So
Mm-hmm.
it's, for me, strong would definitely be along the line of caring, supporting, and yeah, that's what it is. I don't know what is it for you?
For me, the way I would define strong would be dependable and
Okay.
always doing your part to create positivity for everyone else around you. One of the things that we talked about in the Young Men Leading Change program is the bystander. What's it called? Like,
Intervention.
yeah,
Bystander intervention.
bystander intervention, and how humans naturally, if there are lots of people, are less likely to act, and just being very aware that just because there are lots of other people doesn't mean anything. What matters is, are you going to be taking initiative and taking action rather than just being passive, right? And just waiting for the world to to come.
For sure, bro. I think what you're talking about is relating how people sort of wait for somebody else to take
Taking
action.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, to take an action, right? Is the, I guess, the bystander effect, whereby if
Yes.
something, if there was a, let's say, dangerous area. This is one of the things that we discussed, right? And like you rightly said, one of the things we discussed one of the weeks at Young Men Leading Change, and it was the bystander intervention, which is one of the steps that we teach, and which is one of the steps that we sort of discuss, right? Because in order to sort of end gender-based violence, you have to be an active bystander. You have to be somebody who is able to read the room, see the situation, and also know how to be able to help somebody who's in need, right? And it's not necessarily saying be the hero, right? Because for the most part, being a hero can definitely lead you into trouble, or can definitely get you killed. Just going back to the question, I think you can definitely be a strong man, right? You can definitely be a man that leads change without being strong all the time, because strong is definitely it definitely has so many different definitions, right? And it's not just about being physically strong, right? It's not just about being physically strong. It entails a whole lot of other things. We talked about masculinity during the program, and I was just asking, like, is there a way that you viewed yourself before the program in terms of, like, your masculine expression and masculinity, right? As opposed to now that you've gone through the program and we've had the conversations that we had, has it changed in any way?
To be honest, I think, especially since like you and me, we did the mending program together, a lot of the material was very similar. So a lot of the realizations that I came to then it would be a lot easier to talk about. But as you know, I had a lot of the material carried over. For me personally, I didn't experience it as much per se, but definitely just being able to talk about a lot of topics of conversation surrounding masculinity in a way that is positive and engaging is incredibly, incredibly important. And I think that there are lots of other people who would stand to benefit from attending sessions like this and just reflecting on the way that they view what is masculinity. Whether it is what are some of the positive traits surrounding masculinity that is important to live up to, and what are the negative ones that they have been living up to that perhaps they could reflect on. So yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Wow, that's amazing. That's pretty interesting. And I like how you phrase that. There are there are the positives of understanding and having conversations like this, because conversations like this enable you to be able to understand yourself a lot clearer, understand how you express yourself a lot clearer, and how that the way you express yourself affects others in general. And yeah, I appreciate you coming on here, bro. I appreciate the conversation we just had and
Yeah, no
being
problem.
the program. Is there anything you wanted to say right before you get off?
Not really. Just I'm happy that the program went so well, and I'm looking forward to, encourage others to attend this one or similar ones across Canada.
Awesome. Awesome. All right, bro. Thank you so
Bye.
much for coming on.
Yeah, take care.
Yeah. Awesome, guys. That was Chris, one of our leaders, as I said. Very awesome dude. Very intuitive, as you can hear. Yeah. So we're gonna have David is gonna come on here. Hey, David, what's up?
Good, you? How's it going?
I'm doing well, bro. I'm doing well. Thank you for coming on here, bro.
No problem.
Yeah, I was hoping we could maybe talk a little bit about consent and healthy relationships, if that's okay.
Yeah, definitely.
And I don't know, do you remember, a little bit about what we talked about consent?
Yeah, I know we discussed a lot that session. We talked about like how consent isn't just um isn't just like forceful uh isn't just like forceful acts. It's also like not paying attention to subtle, like the little things, like if people's attitudes towards what you do to them. So not paying
Yeah.
attention. I know that was a major one. So, and I know we said consent is freely given, mutually
Really
agreed
good.
upon, active,
Awesome.
enthusiastic, repeated and reversed. So yeah, I remember that
Awesome.
one. And we gave like a lot of scenarios, videos. So like that was really um informative.
So I really appreciate the fact that you can remember all of that. That's amazing, bro. And just because I don't really know who's on here, right? So I was hoping we could sort of take a little bit of time. We don't have to take too long on this, but we can take a little bit of time to maybe break down those things that consent is, that we talked about that consent is. Because for a lot of people, I know consent is pretty much yes or no, which in I guess in retrospect it really was like it is yes or no, right? But it's never that simple, right? Because some situations are sticky, right? We never really know, right? And from what we discussed during our sessions, it was hard. We had some scenarios where even me, you, everybody, Lucas, everybody, we were like, that's a really that's a really weird situation, and it was hard to sort of navigate around it, right? And so I feel like if we broke down the freely giving, mutually agreed upon, enthusiastic, active, repeated, and reversed, then maybe we can people can get a better understanding of what consent is and be able to navigate, be able to understand how to sort of apply it, right? Because it's one thing to have knowledge, and then it's another thing to apply the knowledge, right? So let's start with freely giving, right? So when we say consent is freely giving, what's the first thing that comes to mind for you?
Uh, you don't expect anything back from it.
Hmm.
It's not like,
That's for sure.
yeah, you don't do something for someone just to get something back.
That's right. That's right. And it should be that included, right? Because it shouldn't be a tit for tat kind of thing. It shouldn't be, a sort of a business transaction, especially when you're now looking into like in certain scenarios, like let's say an intimate relationship,
Yeah.
right? It should be less of a business transaction and more of something that's, if anything, then move into the second thing, mutually agreed upon, right? And when it's freely given, it means there's sort of no coercion, right? There's no external or internal force that's being acted upon it. Like, you're not forcing a person to do it. They have to be like, this is something they want to do. It's freely given. They were not coerced into doing it. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I feel like
Yeah.
also in this case, like a situation of like blackmail could also come into play, where people are just like coerced into doing stuff on the basis of them being blackmailed and stuff. So that's like a major one we talked about.
I'd like you to expand on that if you don't mind. Let's elaborate on that.
So I might just give like maybe like an example, right? So maybe for an intimate, if it comes to like an intimate thing, so um I don't know if this would be like too specific, but for example, even like leaking, blackmailing a girl to leak like maybe some explicit photos online, if except she like has sex with you. So that's just like an example of that. From there, you know that's like consent being taken away. She doesn't have like enough rationale will to make that decision. Like if at all she actually accepts to do that, that's because she was coerced. So
yeah, and her power to be able to make a decision was essentially taken away from her, because it's blackmail, right?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. That was a good example. And that then leads us to mutually agreed upon, because it should be something that we all come together, that whatever is going to be done should be done together, right? It should be mutually agreed upon. That means the two people, or all the participants involved in that activity or that scenario should all have agreed upon what is going to happen, which means they should also have all the information that they need to be able to participate in that situation. And I feel like I remember Tobi talking about how if he was to go for a party, right, and he decides he wants to stay at home, but his friends are sort of like, hey, let's go, it's gonna be good. And then they get to or was it you? I'm not even sure. But they get to the party or some sort of amusement park or something, and it's something that it's something they're not willing to do, right? And then the person realizes that, oh, they did not have the full information. They didn't have all the information that they needed, right? So that then ties into mutually agreed upon, and because the person needs to have all the information of what they're getting into.
Yeah.
You don't want to blindside them, right? Yeah. Moving on to active and enthusiastic. I really like that word, enthusiastic. Yeah, active and enthusiastic. What do you think?
Honestly, like even before taking this program, that was one of the ones where like actually expanded my knowledge, kind of, because I never really used to view the enthusiasm aspect. I only thought like it had to do more of like the words and stuff. But even like with looking at people's facial expressions concerning like things you want to do to them, it goes a long way. It goes a long way in actually determining if the interaction was consensual or not. Because like sometimes you might persuade people to do stuff or to do, and then you might see like a kind of grudge or restriction, but just accept on the basis of just because they want to accept, or maybe they just want to make you feel good, but not actually 100% wanting to do that activity. So that was one thing I
Mm.
really learned, and yeah.
So it's all about like I think you're referring to body language,
Yeah,
right?
that was a major
Body,
one of them. Yeah.
yeah, body language, right? Because for somebody to be active, they need to be like it needs to be like hell yeah, as opposed to
Mm.
oh okay, okay, you know, yeah, it should be kind of thing. But no, it's more like, they have to be active and enthusiastic. They have to be fully in it, or they're not in it at all. And you're right. I feel like a lot of people, even with like things that are less of a sexual nature, right? Even things like just like, oh, let's go out to eat. Even things like, let's let's take a walk, or let's go get coffee or stuff like that. Simple things, right? People don't really read into a person's body language. They might see it, but they might ignore it even, because they're like, oh, it's not that serious. But then again, in order to have healthy relationships is to practice consent. I personally feel like consent equals to healthy relationship. Healthy Consent equals to healthy relationship. Simple. That's just it. Full stop. Because, right, and consent should be applied in our everyday life, right? It shouldn't be just with things of a sexual nature. It should be with things that are like, as simple as going to get coffee, as simple as going to a party with a friend, and as simple as like, just anything. Consent should be applied to anything, and it should be active and enthusiastic, freely given, mutually agreed upon. So the last one is repeated and reversed, right? Is there anything that comes to mind? Repeated and reversed.
Repeated, reversed. I feel like that's kind of like maybe a reassurance,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
reaffirmation of what you're actually doing, of
most
that
definitely.
specific activity.
Yeah,
Just
yeah. And yeah, go ahead.
try to know like if you all are still on the same page, because
Most definitely.
with consent you can always say no at any time. So you have to,
Most definitely.
at the different stages, you have to know like where the person is on.
Most definitely. Most definitely. It's yeah, I really like the way you put it. I think that's so important. Assurance, right? It's assuring that throughout this whole process of whatever it is that is being done, both participants are aware of what is going on and are sure that this is something that they're okay with. So it's repeated and reversed in the sense that if the person said yes to this activity the day before, doesn't mean it doesn't mean that they're okay with the activity. They're okay to do the activity maybe like 5 minutes after, right? Because they said yes before doesn't mean they can't say no after, right? It has to be repeated. You have to consistently ask, is this okay? Are you enjoying this? Is this a good time? Are you having a good time? Right? It's repeated and reversed. Like, and in the same way, um, yeah, in the same way, the same people are also asking, like, the other person is asking the other person, y'all are checking in. It's all about checking in and assuring the person that they're being safe and they're comfortable with whatever is going on. So yeah, we've essentially went through all our definitions of consent, right? It's freely given, it's mutually agreed upon, active and enthusiastic, and repeated and reverse. So the last question I'm gonna ask you, bro, and I really appreciate you coming on here, bro. Really appreciate you. Last question I'm gonna ask is, what does consent look like in our everyday lives? I feel like I've said that often, but I wanna hear your opinion. What does that look like in our everyday lives, in our intimate lives?
Yeah, I feel like consent is like a huge foundation for like even various relationships at work, at work, school, intimate relationship. So you even gave the example of like just a little activity like going out with friends, just trying to see their level of motivation about that activity. Or I know you gave an example of
Yeah.
of someone at work that the person gave a compliment on your jacket, and the person had to
Yeah.
like touch the jacket without actually.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's even like to the person it might seem like, oh, it's just a nice gesture, but like there was no consent there. So I feel
Yeah.
like it goes
Facts.
beyond. A lot of people think it's just your intimate relationships or just like sex, but it goes a long way. Like
Mm,
even with people that you're very close with, there still has to be like that consent. Like you're asking them, "Oh, is
most
it right?
definitely.
Should I do this?" So yeah, I feel like it encompasses like literally, literally all like your life, basically, like your interactions with people, be it at work, at school, church, blah blah blah. It's a big thing that should be always respected.
Awesome. Awesome, bro. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. That is such a wholesome summary of it all.
Yeah,
And thank you. Thank you so much for coming on here. Thank
thank
you
you
for
for
this conversation.
thank
All right, I'll see you, bro. Take care. Awesome, awesome, guys. That was such a wholesome conversation. I appreciate that, David. So, um, right now, we're just gonna have a question and answer session. How can people get involved with young men leading change? It is absolutely simple. All you have to do is either hit me up or you could send a message to the KSAC, the Kawartha Sexual Assault Center, and yeah, just send them a message. Say you want to get involved with young men leading change, and they will get you started. They will give you Lucas's email, and we can definitely get you set up and get started for our next cohort. So you can definitely reach out to KSAC, send them a DM, and say, "Hey, I'm interested." But it's mostly for uh racialized young men, right? So yeah, just for us to keep that in mind. But you can definitely get started with young men lane change. But there are other opportunities to get involved with KSAC, with the Kawartha Sexual Assault Center. Yeah, Lucas just dropped his email, or you can send it straight to Lucas. Send an email, shoot him an email, and say, "Hey, I'm interested." And if you're not able to get into young men leading change, there are definitely other opportunities at KSAC that you can definitely get involved in. A few years ago, I would not have imagined being able to talk about these things and have a space where I can just be myself and just talk about things that things that matter, like consent, right? And how consent should be in our everyday lives, right? And bystander intervention, right? There are a lot of bystander interventions. One of the things that when I first learned about um, bystander intervention, one of the things that stood out completely for me was the strategies that you can use, right? And the barriers that there are to, not intervening and helping somebody out in a public setting, right? Because you could definitely, there are a lot of reasons you can definitely give yourself as to why you shouldn't intervene even when somebody's in danger. Like, hey, that's none of my business. Or yeah, I don't know the full story, so I'm just not gonna be part of it, right? But there are strategies to overcoming those barriers, and there's so many other barriers that I cannot remember right now. But there are a lot of strategies, right? You need to be one of the strategies I can tell you, and I can teach that has worked for me is to sort of like distract, right? You can definitely distract the person. You can distract the person who is sort of inflicting the harm in the situation. Another way is to delegate, right? Like Chris spoke about. It's not necessarily about being a hero. It's about like being the person who sort of knows how to like step in a situation, right? And to step in a situation where you can tell people what to do, or get, if somebody, let's say in a club setting, like somebody's in danger, you know who to go to and say, hey, this and this is happening to somebody. Can you help? Right? As opposed to doing it all by yourself, going in and being the hero, right? And yeah, those are just some of the ways that we can actually be an active bystander, right? And do bystander intervention. Yeah, there's so many other ways, right? That you can also be direct, use a direct approach. I don't necessarily like advise that. But yeah, we had so many wonderful conversations about so many things that have helped me to understand myself better, and understand how the things that I do and the things that I take in and the things that society tells me about myself, and entertainment industry tells me about myself, social media tells me about myself, how they can definitely bring in a negative, they can definitely paint a negative picture of myself, right? And a negative image of myself, and how they can, all the things that society tells us we should, sort of puts us in a box, right? And that's the man box, right? And the things that, if you're not what's in the man box, if you're not strong, if you're not, rich, if you're not aggressive, if you're not sexually aggressive, if you're not a macho, if you're not a womanizer, if you're not suave, if you're not good with the ladies, if you're not tough, right, then you're not a man, right? And things like that, they sort of build a negative narrative for young men, and they definitely sort of feel like the need for a person to act outside of themselves and be what they're not, right? And that's just because like we want to belong. As a man, I want to belong. I want to be part of. I want to be part of the jocks. I want to be part of the athletes, right? I want to be part of that. I don't want to be an outsider. And it's the need to not be an outsider, and the need to be what I'm not, that just in the end it causes us to cause harm to ourselves and do harm to others, right? And these are just some of the things we discussed, and these are just some of the things that we talked about during our sessions. And there's a lot of pressure on men to act a certain type of way just to belong, and act a certain type of way just to be identified as a man, right? If you're not a man, if you're really a man, if you're a man, then you do this. If you're a man, you have to do stupid things. If you're a man, you have to be sexually aggressive. If you're a man, you have to be financially secure. You have to be bold. Yeah. So much pressure on a man to be a certain type of way, right? To be arrogant. Oh, my bad, guys. You don't have to ask for consent as a man. Yeah, so there's a lot of pressure on a man to be a certain type of way from society, from social media, from even the gaming industry. Yeah, from our family and friends, our culture, our tradition. There are some things in my culture that I can recognize. I'm from West African Nigeria, and there's some things in my culture that I recognize are very, very negative, and are very, very destructive, as opposed to building a person up. They're very destructive, and they build a certain type of narrative that only leads to a man being, how do I put it? A man being a man causing harm to himself and to others and those he loves and those he actually cares for, right? And that's the way they say a man should be, based on that culture and tradition. Awesome. So, but I appreciate every single person that showed up. I appreciate every single person that showed up to have these conversations, and I hope you enjoyed the live. And if you do want to get involved with the Young Men Leading Change program, feel free to message Lucas, or feel free to message the Kawartha Sexual Assault Center. Just shoot them a DM and say, hey, I want to get involved with the Young Men Leading Change program. I appreciate every single person who came on the live. Right, so have a good night, everybody. Have a great weekend. Take care.